On a sun-bleached stretch of Highway 178, right at the mouth of a California canyon, two metal signs stand quietly by the road. One is in English, one is in Spanish. Every year, around Memorial Day, a sheriff's deputy climbs up in a bucket truck and changes the number painted on them. In 2026, that number reached 348, not injuries, not rescues, 348 confirmed deaths in the same stretch of water, counted since 1968. If you are planning to drive up to this canyon and cool off in that river this summer, you need to understand exactly what killed all 348 of them. Because when you get there, the water is not going to look dangerous at all. Part of what makes this river so dangerous is exactly what makes it so popular in the first place. This is not an ugly, obviously hazardous stretch of water. Sunlight breaks apart on turquoise pools between granite boulders, pine-covered slopes rise straight out of the canyon walls, and on a hot July afternoon it looks like one of the most inviting places in the entire state to jump in and cool off. That beauty is not a coincidence, and it is not harmless. It is precisely the reason so many visitors underestimate what is happening beneath the surface. This is the Kern River, and to understand why it keeps a body count like a war memorial, you first need to understand where all that water comes from. The Kern begins as snowmelt high in the southern Sierra Nevada, near Mount Whitney, the tallest peak in the continental United States. From there, it drops almost 15,000 feet in elevation over roughly 165 miles, carving through granite canyons inside Sequoia National Forest and the Golden Trout Wilderness, before it reaches a reservoir called Lake Isabella, then continues south toward the city of Bakersfield. Picture the distance from Los Angeles to Las Vegas, and now picture all of that ground covered by a single river, falling out of the sky. Dividing the upper and lower sections of the river sits Lake Isabella itself, a reservoir popular for fishing and calmer water sports, where the water is noticeably warmer and far more forgiving than the river feeding into and out of it. That contrast matters because visitors who spend the morning safely floating on the lake often assume the river a few miles away will behave the same way. It does not. The lake is engineered to be calm. The river was never engineered at all. That drop in elevation is not just scenery. It is the engine behind everything that happens downstream. Heavy water does not behave like the water in your local swimming pool, and the numbers back that up. Officials with the Army Corps of Engineers have measured flow rates below Isabella Dam exceeding 8,000 cubic feet per second during peak runoff. The water temperature, fed straight from snowpack, can sit as low as 38 degrees Fahrenheit, barely above freezing, even in the middle of a 100-degree summer day. So here is your first practical rule, and it matters more than anything else in this video. Before you touch that water, check the current flow and temperature reports published by the Army Corps of Engineers and the Kern County Sheriff's Office, because a river that looks calm on the surface can be moving fast enough underneath to sweep an adult off their feet in seconds. The town most people associate with the river is Kernville, a small community a few miles north of Lake Isabella with only a couple thousand full-time residents. For 50 years, it has built its entire economy around people coming to play in and around the water, and it works. On a busy summer weekend, this tiny town can see visitor numbers climb past 30,000 people up and down the riverbanks, the lake shore, and the surrounding foothills. Commercial whitewater rafting has operated here since permits were first issued in the 1970s, with outfitters running everything from gentle half-day floats to serious Class 4 and Class 5 whitewater on the lower river. It is also marketed, accurately, as the closest whitewater rafting to Los Angeles, roughly a 3-hour drive from the city. That is an important detail to hold on to, because it tells you this is not some obscure, forgotten stretch of water. It is one of the most visited rivers in Southern California, and that popularity is part of what keeps the death count climbing every single year. The Kern also carries an official federal designation as a wild and scenic river, and rafting outfitters have carved the lower stretch into named sections over the decades. Places river guides call the Jungle Run for its overhanging trees, and the Miracle Run for the size of its rapids. Above Lake Isabella, the Upper Kern is considered the most scenic and the most accessible section, which is exactly why it draws the largest crowds of casual visitors who never intended to do anything more adventurous than wade in and cool off. So why does a river that thousands of families visit every weekend end up killing more people than almost anywhere else in the country? The United States Forest Service puts it plainly. Drowning is the leading cause of accidental death along the Kern, and falling into the water is considered just as dangerous as swimming in it on purpose. That single sentence should change how you think about this place. You do not need to decide to go swimming to end up in the water. A wet rock under your sandal, a step too close to the edge while you are taking a photo, is enough. Here is the mechanism, broken into 3 parts you can actually use. First, the current. Even sections of river that look flat and glassy on the surface can be moving fast just a few inches down, dragging anything caught in it toward the center of the channel. Second, the cold. Water in the high 30s degrees Fahrenheit can trigger an involuntary gasp reflex the instant your face goes under, which is how experienced swimmers end up inhaling water in the first 2 seconds of a fall, before panic even sets in. That same cold water accelerates hypothermia far faster than most people expect, cutting the amount of time a struggling swimmer has to self-rescue. Third, the underwater terrain. Submerged boulders, fallen trees, and root systems create what rescue teams call hydraulics, essentially underwater holes where the current folds back on itself and can pin a person against debris instead of carrying them downstream to safety. Put those 3 things together and you get a river that can take down a strong adult swimmer in water that is barely waist deep. None of these 3 factors require a flood, a storm, or unusual conditions to become lethal. They are simply how this particular river behaves on an average sunny afternoon, which is exactly why so many of the people it has killed were not doing anything that looked reckless in the moment. Search and rescue teams in the area estimate they pull roughly 5 people out of this river alive every year, in addition to the ones who do not make it out at all. The U.S. Forest Service's own description of the lower Kern warns that its powerful currents and underwater hazards can trap even the strongest swimmers, which is precisely why sheriff's search and rescue crews train specifically for this stretch of water, practicing throwing rescue rope bags to swimmers in trouble and staging rescuers along the bank in relay positions before every holiday weekend. The safety response to all 3 of those factors is simple, and it is the same advice repeated by the sheriff's office every single year. Wear a properly fitted life vest rated for whitewater, not a decorative pool floaty, every time you are within a few feet of moving water. Never go in alone. Keep small children within arm's reach at all times, not just within sight, because the U.S. Forest Service has stated plainly that falling in is as dangerous as swimming. Skip the alcohol if you plan to be anywhere near the water, since impaired judgment and cold, fast currents are a documented combination in past incidents here. And check for cell coverage before you go, because much of the canyon has no reliable phone signal, which means a real emergency can mean a long wait for help to physically arrive. If you do lose service, know that some smartphone emergency features can still send a location ping, even without a normal signal. But that is a backup, not a plan. And it should never be the reason you skip telling a real person your route beforehand. Long before any of this had a name in English, the Kern River Valley was home to the Tubatulabal people, whose own name for themselves translates to something close to people who speak the language. Tribal accounts describe the river as sacred, tied to a history the tribe says stretches back before the mountains themselves took their current shape, according to tribal chairman Robert Gomez. The river itself takes its modern name from Edward Kern, a topographer and artist who mapped the area in the 1840s. Settlers arrived during California's gold rush era, panning the riverbanks for gold, followed by ranchers who used the valley for grazing cattle through the same canyons visitors now drive through on their way to go rafting. Agriculture eventually took hold in the flatter land downstream near Bakersfield, and the Kern's water became just as valuable for irrigating crops as it ever was for recreation, which is part of why the dam and reservoir system exists at all today. By the early 20th century, the Southern California Edison Company had built a series of hydroelectric dams along the river to generate power for the growing cities downstream, permanently changing how and where the water flowed. That history matters for one very practical reason. The people who lived alongside this river for the longest stretch of time treated it with a kind of respect that modern visitors often skip entirely. This is not a river you conquer for an afternoon selfie. It is a river you plan around, the same way earlier generations planned around it for thousands of years. The reservoir at the center of this story, Lake Isabella, exists because of a dam completed in the 1950s, built specifically to control the river's seasonal flooding and store water for the farmland around Bakersfield. That single engineering decision reshaped the entire valley's relationship with tourism, turning a working agricultural river into the recreation destination it is today, complete with marinas, campgrounds, and the rafting industry that now defines the local economy. Bakersfield's own musical history is tangled up with this river too. Merle Haggard, the pioneer of the Bakersfield sound and one of the city's most famous native sons, wrote and recorded a song simply titled After the River in the mid-1980s, built around the fictional story of a drowning during a nighttime swim. It climbed into the national country charts at the time, and decades later, locals still bring it up in the same breath as the real death toll, because the fictional warning in that song turned out to undersell what actually happens here every summer. More recently, a local nonprofit called the Kern River Conservancy has spent more than a decade handing out free, properly fitted life vests at river access points. Specifically because rescue officials kept encountering children brought to the water wearing nothing but inflatable arm floaties bought at a drugstore, which do essentially nothing against a current this strong. By the middle of the 20th century, the danger had become official policy, not just local knowledge. 1968 is the year Kern County officially started counting the dead, posting the first version of the signs you saw at the start of this video, a public physical acknowledgement that this stretch of water needed its own permanent warning system. Since then, the trend has not improved. Sergeant Rodney Jones, who leads the Sheriff's Search and Rescue Division, has stated that the average over the past decade sits at roughly 6 deaths a year, climbing to around 7 a year over the most recent 5-year stretch. The single worst year on record is 2017, when 16 people drowned in 12 months. At least 106 of the total recorded deaths have happened since the year 2000 alone. And that overall number does not even include the upper river in neighboring Tulare County, which does not keep its own drowning statistics or people who remain missing and are presumed dead. Here is the detail that should genuinely worry you if you are planning a trip from outside the immediate area. Investigators have repeatedly said that the overwhelming majority of victims are not locals. Most come from out of town, and a large share of those specifically come from the greater Los Angeles region, the exact demographic most likely to be watching a video like this one. Kern County has spent roughly $100,000 on advertising campaigns specifically targeting the Los Angeles market, warning people before they ever get in the car, on top of handing out free whitewater-rated life jackets at river access points every Memorial Day weekend. Local residents tend to know which sections to avoid and when. Visitors, understandably, do not, And that gap in local knowledge is exactly what the river exploits. A local fire captain who has spent years working these banks has put it simply, saying people in the valley understand you have to respect this river, and that respect is exactly what gets lost the moment someone drives in from a couple hours away for a single hot afternoon. There is no shortage of official warning either. County Sheriff Donnie Youngblood has been blunt about it, once telling reporters, "You can't legislate stupidity." He has also confirmed the county will not close the river to the public, arguing there are simply too many access points to patrol effectively. A public information officer with the sheriff's office has described one case that sums up how little margin this river leaves for error, involving a young girl whose family had stopped along the bank with no intention of letting her into the water at all. She slipped on a wet rock at the edge and was in the current before anyone could reach her. Nobody in that family made a reckless decision. They simply stood too close to water that does not forgive proximity. That means the responsibility for your safety here sits entirely with you, not with a gate, a lifeguard, or a fence. Now let's talk about who this river has actually taken, because statistics do not save lives the way specific stories do. Behind every one of the 348 names on that roadside sign is a coroner's report with a date, a time, and a location. And four of those reports in particular show you exactly how little this river cares about who you are or how well you think you know it. Here is the decision that ended in tragedy for a 15-year-old girl from Bakersfield. On July 8th, 2025, Ester Isabel Villanueva Torres went into the Kern River at Riverview Park, a public access point well within the city limits, nowhere near a remote wilderness trail. Search teams recovered her body from the river that same afternoon around 5 o'clock. She was not on a backcountry hiking trip. She was at a city park on what was likely just another hot July day in a location thousands of local families treat as an ordinary swimming spot. 4 days later, on July 12th, a second victim was found in the exact same stretch of river. 46-year-old Carlos Gonzalez Jr. of Los Angeles was discovered unresponsive in the water. The Kern County Coroner confirmed both deaths as accidental drownings. 2 victims, 4 days apart, one a local teenager, one an adult visitor from exactly the region the county spends advertising dollars trying to warn. 2 entirely different lives, 2 entirely different reasons for being at that park that week, and the exact same outcome, in the exact same few hundred feet of water. Here's what I keep coming back to with this next case. Almost exactly 1 year later, on July 4th, 2026, 24-year-old Gustavo Angel Oria Lara of Newhall entered the Kern River near the Keysville South Recreation Site at around 3:45 in the afternoon. Within moments, according to the Kern County Sheriff's Office, he became unresponsive. His body was not recovered until 3 days later, on July 7th. Independence Day, a holiday built around cookouts, water, and heat, is exactly the kind of day that fills this stretch of river with out-of-town visitors who do not know what is waiting under the surface. There is also the case of James Ashley Bawayan, 35, of Chino Hills, who went into the river near Black Gulch, close to the small community of Bodfish, in the middle of July. His body was not located for a full week, and the Kern County Coroner's Office later confirmed the cause as accidental drowning, the same finding attached to nearly every other name on this list. A week between entering the water and being found is not unusual on this river. It is close to routine, and it tells you something about how thoroughly this water can hide a person once the current and the underwater debris field take hold, dragging a body far from wherever the person was last seen standing. And here is the case that should end any assumption you might have that only tourists are at risk. On May 5th, 2026, at almost exactly 1 in the afternoon, 30-year-old Scott Clay Kuykendall was found dead in the river near the Keysville South Boat Ramp. Kuykendall was not a visitor from Los Angeles. He was from Lake Isabella, the community sitting directly on the reservoir this river feeds. He lived there. He almost certainly knew the reputation of this water better than almost anyone watching this video, had probably driven past those roadside signs dozens of times in his life. The river killed him anyway, in broad daylight, in a spot local enough to have its own boat ramp and parking lot. That is the pattern underneath every one of these names. A city park, a recognized recreation site, a local resident. None of them needed to be reckless or uninformed to end up in these statistics. They needed the water to look calm for just long enough. None of these 4 cases involved anyone attempting a dangerous stunt, ignoring a posted warning sign at the exact spot they entered, or venturing into some remote, unmarked section of the canyon. A city park in Bakersfield, a well-known recreation site with its own parking area, a public boat ramp. These are the ordinary, easily accessible places tens of thousands of people visit every single summer without incident, which is exactly why the river's real danger is so easy to miss until it is too late. So what does all of this actually mean for you, specifically if you are planning to visit the Kern River this summer? It means the sign you saw at the start of this video is not a piece of history, it is a running total, and it will very likely be higher by the time you watch this than it was when this script was written. Somewhere along Highway 178, that number is going to change again this Memorial Day, the way it has changed every year since 1968. The Tubatulabal people who first lived in this valley did not treat this river as a backdrop for a good afternoon. They treated it as something to be respected on its own terms, and that respect is the single thing missing from most of the tragedies you just heard about. None of the people in those cases were doing anything unusual for a hot California day, a city park, a popular boat ramp, a holiday weekend. That is exactly why this river is so effective at what it does. Before you go, do 4 things. Check the current flow and water temperature through the Army Corps of Engineers or the Kern County Sheriff's Office before you leave home, not after you arrive, since flow can change dramatically depending on how much water is being released from the dam that week. Wear a whitewater rated life vest anytime you are near moving water, not just when you plan to swim, and make sure it actually fits, since drugstore arm floaties have repeatedly failed to protect the children. Rescue teams have pulled from this river. Never go in alone, keep young children within arm's reach rather than within eyesight, and never mix alcohol with any time spent near the water. And tell someone exactly which access point you are going to, and when you expect to be back, because cell service in much of this canyon simply does not exist. And the difference between a close call and becoming name number 349 can come down to how quickly someone knew where to start looking. The next time you drive along Highway 178 and pass those 2 metal signs, you will already know what the number means, and you will already know it is not going to stop climbing on its own.